Okay, so the thing we want to look at today is number one, we want to see how we can begin to use VS Code to write our program. From our last experience, we explained some few things about inline elements and block elements. But for today's class, we are going to dive right into the code. We are going to be using some of those elements that we actually reviewed from our last class and the text that we all read. So I've had VS Code from our last class. We also installed VS Code. So that's Visual Studio Code currently loaded on my screen. The first thing we need to do is to toggle the Explorer window. Then click on this to toggle the Explorer window. Now that we have opened the Explorer window, you would notice that there is nothing we have opened currently. So it is just like we loaded VS Code. This is possibly my first time of using VS Code. And because we are on this environment, I can increase, you can do whatever you want to do here. I mean, you're free to do whatever you want to do as far as it concerns modifying your development environment. Now, if you recall also, we installed some certain extension last week, ranging from live server and the rest of them. And as you can see from here, this is my live server button is active, so I can actually see the live server open. So now that all these things have been configured, so we are going to come here. And this works just the same way that Windows Explorer works. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Open Folder, and it's going to give me this environment. My project folder is inside Documents. So I'm going to get inside Documents, and I'm going to get inside Projects. I'm going to get inside Projects. So presuming that there is no folder currently, I mean, this is my first time of using VS Code, so that means there is no project I have actually worked on. But this is actually obtainable in your own case. So what I do is I come to new folder, but because I'm not using a Windows machine, so if you're using a Windows, you can right click at this point and create a folder, right? At this point you can right click and create a folder, but because I'm not using Windows, I have a little tiny button here, so I'm going to create a folder, and the folder I'm going to create is actually going to be day1 like this. Before I give the command to create this folder, I need to talk about this pattern of writing my file names or my folder's name. Now, because I don't want to use something they call escape character when I'm actually looking for the name of a folder I've created, and I don't want to do escape character when I'm looking for the file name I've created, I usually recommend that if you are creating a file with a file name that is more than one word, like for example, if we have a file name, say index, contact, about, stuff like that, you can go ahead and do it so long there is no space between them. But once you want to create a file name, something like contact us, those are two different words that are separated by a space. It is recommended, or I'm recommending that you add an underscore to join those words together so that they are not treated as two separate words. Because when you do that, your instructions or your code might not understand that you are actually referring to one thing. I mean, when you are running command line interface commands, you might not understand that you are referring to one file name. It is going to take it as two different parameters. So because of that, it is recommended that you join them together, not with a dot, because when you join two words together with a dot, it is presumed that the other one is actually the extension of the file name. Don't get confused with this. We are going to get into all these details as the class continues. So I've given a file name I want to create, and I'm going to say create. Now, as you can see now, the folder has been created and it is now selected on my own computer. On your own computer, it might not be selected. So I just select the folder and I click on open. And now when I click on open, you see that this is actually the folder we've created. It is actually open currently, but there is nothing inside it. There is no file, there is no folder inside, it's just a bare folder. So the next thing we want to do, because we're using VS Code, the next thing we want to do is to create the files that we are going to be working with. So the first file we want to create is actually the landing of every website. I mean, every developer start by building the index.html, because that is what the crawler is going to use to locate your website. So over the years we've had people who give different kind of name. It is not a crime if you give different kind of name really, but it is just that it is not a standard that is recommended. So the first file you create in this industry is usually the index.html file, which is considered the landing page. So now to do that, I'm going to click on this. As you can see, there are 4 icons here. We have the new file, we have the new folder, we have the refresh, and we have the collapse explorer. So we are interested in creating a file, so we're just going to click on this new file. So I click on new file and I'm giving it the name of index.html like that, and pressing enter. Now once I press enter, it selects that file and opens up the file on this environment. So because last week when we installed VS Code, we mentioned that there is a particular extension that comes bundled with VS Code called Emmet. And what Emmet helps us to do is it helps us autocomplete some of the codes we are going to write. So for example, as a front-end person, the first thing you need to do is to set up the boilerplate of whatever you're going to write. So to set up this boilerplate, I'm supposed to do something like this. Doing something like this, doc type, I'm going to do HTML like this. I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to do something like this, and I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to do something like this, and so on and so forth. It's amazing. Why would I want to waste those keystrokes? So what I'm going to do instead is to do this exclamation mark, and as you can see, Emmet abbreviation is called, and I can just press enter to activate it, and this will be fully set up for me. I'll do it again. So I'm going to do exclamation mark, and I'm going to do enter. Some people will say exclamation mark tab. Whatever you do is fine. In fact, even if you do exclamation mark and use your mouse to select that Emmet abbreviation for one exclamation mark, the job will be delivered to you. So now that this boilerplate has been set up, the next thing we probably will be doing is to go through this whole jargons that is actually written here, since all of us actually start from this point. The first thing here is the doc type HTML. This is the document type declaration that tells your browser that everything that is written within this code base is actually conforming to the standard of HTML5, which is currently the latest one. So it is important that you do this to ensure that all the, suffice to say that the reason why HTML5 is considered superior to HTML4 as it were is because HTML5 comes with semantic elements. And when we say semantic element, we are saying elements that are somewhat self-descriptive. So for example, if I say put it aside, you know that it's going to be by the side, right? So aside is a semantic element in HTML that helps, even though yes, it does not particularly carry the element and put it in one side, but when people read through your code, they should be able to understand that yes, because it is a side, it is possibly presumed to be for the side. Another good example is when screen readers, for example, read your code. HTML5 makes it easy for people who have some sort of disability to use your application and still understand what you're doing, compared to probably HTML4 where we have a bunch of div all over the place. So that is what doc-type HTML does. It reports to your browser that everything written here are conforming to HTML5 standard. And as a matter of fact, almost all the browsers are actually operated at the point where they understand all the semantic code. So it is not as if it is something that is totally new. Then the next one here is the HTML tag, which also declares the language, the default language you are writing on. Most of the time I try to explain this in this line, that because you are in an Anglophone country, you don't necessarily have to say you cannot build for people who are in the Francophone region. So instead of declining to build for people in the Francophone countries, you can actually use this to trigger a translator to render your application when it is deployed. So for example, let's assume I'm here in an Anglophone country and I'm building for a Francophone country. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say HTML lang equals FR. And when I deploy this application, if it is deployed in a region that does not speak the language I am writing with it, which is English, of course, if it is deployed in a region where English is not their primary language, what will happen is that the browser's API will call for a translator to translate whatever it is in that application. Then we have the head. The head section is actually is like the setting part of your application. This is where you put in the meta, the links, and the script if you're having a defer attribute, and so on and so forth. This head section is also the section that digital marketers tweak to ensure that your application is search engine optimized, right? So for example, we are going to do a whole lot of things in this head section that will ensure that the web crawler can target this application and display it to people who are searching using various search platforms on the internet. That section is beyond the scope of this class, and I'm not going to speak more about it, but I'm just going to explain these three default settings that comes with development. The first one here is meta type set UTF-8. Now this is the feature that enables your browser to display emojis. So for example, even though when you don't put this, it will display emoji for real, but it's just the standard that we put it so that we know that this encoding is usually UTF-8. I will send you a link where we are going to read a little about the various encoding that are available. Then we have the viewport. This section is what actually makes it possible for us to build mobile ready applications. As you can see here, with device minus with. So what it means is that whatever width you are given, it is going to be calculated based on the size of your screen, kind of things like that. So it gives us the opportunity to be able to build mobile ready application. Then the next thing is a title. This title is what is displayed on the top of your browser when you write your code. And then that's the end of the head, at least for this, because we are still going to expand on this in our next class. Then the body tag, which also has a closing element, is actually going to be everything that the users can be able to use your website or your application to do. Then don't forget to close the HTML tag. That is this one we started from here. So now in the body of our HTML document, let's not forget it's also good that you set this autosave, right? Because as a developer, most of the time you focus so much on solving the problem that's actually before you that you forget to think about the little things that matters, like for example saving your code. So but because we are using an integrated development environment, a powerful one of that, we have this option of actually auto saving. So you can just toggle this on so that you don't bother yourself about whether I pressed Ctrl S or I'm not pressing Ctrl S. All you have to do is just to write your logic and you leave the rest for VS Code to decide. So for now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in an H1 here, which is we're going to put this is a header 1 tag like this. We're just going to do this is a header 1 tag, and then we are going to trigger the live server, and let's see what's going to happen. I'm triggering the live server, and the live server is running on port 5500. And as you can see, this is header 1. Now we'll go back to what we are doing like this, and then when we are here, we can do a whole lot of things. See, for example, after the last class we had, I gave you a task to read up from a website where we talked about inline and block elements, the different types of elements that we use on HTML. And from what you possibly read, you came across some things like anchor tag is an inline element, and I'm going to say, for example, we are visiting this, and then I'm saying refresh my page, for example, now here I want to put in another thing, so I'm just going to put in span again, and here I'm saying this is another element like this. Now let's go and check our code, and as you can see, refreshes my page, and this is another element. So what this is trying to tell us is that this is actually inline. These two guys here are inline elements. But then let's try and do something. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to move this. I'm going to move it here. Just right up after this, we have H1, and I'm closing the H1 here, and I'm having a span. So let's check what we have. As you can see now, we have this is header 1. Nobody is sharing the line with it, right? But then this is another element that is supposed to be here. As you can see, it is dropping it to the next line. So what does that mean? What does it imply for us? But before we explain what it implies for us, let's try and move span. Possibly, let's be sure. Let's move span to the next line. As you can see from here, we are moving span to the next line. Let's check. Do you see that even though we have moved span to the next line, it is still sharing the same line with this lot? And the reason is simple. The reason is because these guys are actually considered to be inline element. When we say an element is a block element, what we are trying to say in essence is that the element takes up the entire row like this. Now let me do something here. I'm just going to do something like style. Don't bother yourself about this. Let's do this background color red. And for this, I'm going to do the same thing, style background color red, like this. Now, looking at the fact that I've actually applied the same color to these two elements, let us check what has happened. So you can see now that this first one, even though this is a header tag, but because the element that is containing this text is actually a block element, it is occupying the entire row. Alright? It is occupying the entire row. So in as much as what we are actually seeing is this is header 1 tag, we are not seeing any other thing. I actually threw in this style here so that we would be able to see how H1 behaves, because H1 is a block element, and that's why it's occupying the entire row. No other person can take up the place. But then, in the case of span and anchor tag, which is A, it is actually an inline element. So as you can see, even though line 13 and line 14, they are not on the same line, but when we execute it, you will see that this is another element. It's just occupying that section that you have assigned to it. If another inline element should come, it will automatically take the next space. So let's do something like this. So let me add H2 here, for example, and I'm saying this is another block, like this. And let's see, as you can see now, it is taking up another block, right? But if I have added span here, for example, span, and I'm saying this is another inline. Do you see? This is another inline. So it is important that we understand that elements can be inline and elements can be block. But when we say this inline, this is what we mean. And when we say it is block, that is what we are actually referring to. Now, from the articles that we read over the weekend, we saw the various list of elements that are either block or that are either block or inline. For me, I do not recommend that you cram all of them, as a matter of fact, because even some of these things, it is when you want to use them, you then have to research about them. But for me, the more you use them, the more you get familiar with them. So at this level, you don't have to cram everything. The most important thing for you to know now is that we have 6 header elements, and we have paragraph, we have anchor, and we have span, we have image, and so on and so forth. So the more we use these things, the more we learn about them. So this is where I will stop for now, and then I will send you the rest later.